morning, everyone. My presentation today holds the title, Practicing Collectivity Individually in Virtual Steelpan Performances. I begin with two quotes. I should constantly remind myself that the real leap consists in introducing invention into existence. Frantz Fanon. We are dreaming all wrong. Art is otherwise, all that is left, able to lift the grime and glitter caked under eyelids and halt thereby, or crippling dreaming. Truth is otherwise, it risks all to be born, to be unstoppably, irresistibly alive. Toni Morrison. In The Wretched of the Earth, French-Caribbean philosopher Frantz Fanon calls us to attend to the revolutionary potential and possibilities of aesthetics. Fanon teaches us that our encounter and engagement with creative works brings an urgent breath of excitement, arouses muscular tensions, and develops the imagination. Fanon notes that aesthetics reveals the liveliness and the energy in the relationship between performer, creator, audience, and art that is generative of, and I quote, a concerted action. Thinking with Fanon, I attend to the relationality made possible through virtual Steelpan performances in these times and redefinitions of gathering in the face of measures that forecloses in-person gathering still in these times. Times where political and social urgency is ubiquitous and imperative, where our awareness of ruin, peril, right, and precarity is pitched high. I want to consider the gathering and its aesthetic for thinking of how Steelpan and music making work herein, to ask what Steelpan virtual performances can do. What does it mean to practice collectivity individually? What shape does gathering take in virtual Steelpan performances? This space grants the opportunity to do so, to be in a space of study and celebration together. I remain thankful to the organizers for this. So I'd like to play a short clip to orient our ears. And I hope this works. So the inception of 2020's social isolation in Italy heard neighborhoods singing and playing instruments from balconies and rooftops, sounding out life in the face of overwhelming death, sounding out defiance and expressing the interminable. Steelpan performers and organizers who hold a fierce love for the instrument and its music made more concerted efforts during 2020. The first virtual Steelpan performance was held in 2015, performed by 135 participants from 9 different countries. Music ensemble Pastiche actively worked to innovate gathering and to make and to practice relationality in Steelpan music making and performance. Here, a global pan performance emerged out of efforts to connect across borders, making those borders porous by musically reaching across geographic and cultural difference to make beauty, to inaugurate pleasure in Pan. In 2017, the second virtual Steelpan event took place with 300 participants from 11 different countries, perhaps an unknown preparation for its necessity in 2020, which sounded out the largest Steelpan event, virtual Steelpan event, consisting of 691 musicians from 23 countries organized by Pan in Unity. In addition to this, there is also Panorama, a virtual Steelpan competition. Within virtual performances, we can continue in whatever fashion or reformed way to feel and experience ourselves as multidimensional persons within the collective. And in these times, this remains crucial. Virtual Steelpan music making can help us to interrogate how we practice humanity in these times in embodied ways towards making sense of the disorienting impact of heightened virtual realities that present death. In the face of this, the value of life force that emerges from virtual Steelpan performances shows how music works to usher in something different. Coming upon a Steelpan rehearsing, a chance encounter to slow down, stand, dance, and listen, an offered moment to feel, to create another world to occupy together, there was a felt loss in 2020, or since 2020. Through multiple rehearsals, repetitions, and changes to music, as performers, we build a world together, sonically, no words. For some, the virtual could not compare. Performing together creates an environment, an air within which to spend time together, to imbibe the atmosphere with pan sound, its vibration and resonance that sustains livability. This was mourned by so many. My initial thoughts of virtual performances were concerned with comparing what persists from the above described aesthetics of in-person music gatherings in the virtual and what changed. I was occupied with what was otherwise aestheticized in the virtual and the loss and mourning associated with this. In-person music gatherings is often positioned as the only avenue that enables us to touch emotion, to be reached by one another, and to share experience. What I wanted to engage with was that felt loss in gathering virtually, how the virtual enables limited attention economy. I wanted to attend to the media constancy of the virtual that orally and spectacularly reveals the realities of division and exploitation, what Dion Brand describes as the stilled and heightened frequencies of everyday life. Critiques of the virtual surrounded being hypervisual, attention deficit, altering the perception of the public, and thereby altering our experience of each other. Critiques also engaged the porosity between the impact on and conflation of public and private life, as well as the ways in which it transforms the creation and practice of music into an individualistic endeavor and isolated experience. However, the virtual Steelpan music event proposed itself as an amelioration to these critiques in ways that only music can imagine. Thinking through the virtual Steelpan performances, the critiques of the virtual are disruptive in some measure, and this prompted me to ask different questions about imagining otherwise relations in virtual performances that pushes against separation and division. Though it does not carry the same affective and embodied aesthetic as physically playing together, virtual performances should not be discredited. Thus, questions might be posed on aesthetic similarities that work otherwise, attending to the generative potential of virtual creative music practice and performance that are necessary for our current times. In the face of the above critiques, I understand that through the virtual, we are enabled to reach each other. The virtual presented the clearest sharing of experiences that we might have in these times as performances aestheticize other ways of gathering that are not inferior, but rather important to relate to in-person gatherings, offering a different world and a flourishing of life when life and livability continues to be precluded. The significance of technologically informed responses through virtual Steelpan performances are intensified by the global pandemic and international measures taken to curb its havoc. Participants record themselves individually, and their submitted audiovisual data will be carefully curated to create a collective virtual performance out of that individuality. Such performances are generative, taking up an aesthetic translation that illustrates how to still do things and practice relationally in and with love from a distance in a virtual realm. Creative practice in Steelpan continues. The relations that Fanon outlines in creative practice are reconfigured through the interconnection of global performances that foster new ways of being together. To play alone, but still together, to practice community and creating and keeping the communal together, and redefining conventions of identity, border, culture, and belongingness. What then proceeds from making and practicing Steelpan collectivity individually in a virtual realm? The virtual performances and competitions teach us that together we add up to more than the calculus of our compounded vulnerabilities, as Jafari Allen notes. And this is especially useful to think through these times. Practicing collectivity through the virtual realm recognizes the occasion of isolation inaugurated by the pandemic. It recognizes the need to imagine collectivity and performance differently, especially within the ongoing times where divisions that were thought to have drowned continue to resurface in this time of social ills, tragedies, and of prodigious proportions. The need to imagine otherwise in this time of desperation is imperative. I remember Fanon's teachings that creative work develops imagining. Anthony Bogues argues that Fanon is imploring us to actually engage in the work of radically imagining, to imagine anew what human life could be like. I hear this intervention in the numerous performances where, again, Steelpan practitioners are offering other possibilities of living otherwise, for living relationally. Dr. Sharp's arrangement of Pan in Unity that departs from Lennon's Imagine is evocative of imagining anew what human life could be. It is evocative of a Caesarean politics where Aimé Césaire makes clear it is that imagination, that effort to see the future in the present that I shall call poetry, he says, or poetic knowledge. Bogues offers that the work of imagination operates as critical thought. I hear and feel virtual Steelpan organizing in talks, performances, competitions as exemplary of the above. The sound rewrites what is at stake in our times. Practices of gathering and working across multiple differences. The virtual Steelpan performance illustrates a socially distanced collective, performing collectivity individually, where gathering is not foreclosed. Isolation is not a foregone conclusion. Music teaches us this, and Steelpan emphasizes how to navigate infrastructures of foreclosure. And this conference is a very good example of that. In sitting with and listening and feeling various virtual Steelpan performances, I think about how it contradicts and thus can aid in analyzing the authority of these times, especially in its virtual presence. I think of how it can enable gathering differently outside of the conscripts of borders and states and mandates. And finally, that we do need methodologies to make sense of and therein to honor the importance of gathering still in Steelpan. In these times where the relation from within individual spaces extends outward through the virtual. It is a mechanism of repair in the disconnect, division, and implemented isolation. We are dreaming all right within virtual Steelpan performances. With Pan in Unity is imagining, creating and offering music and gathering in the face of its impossibility as a medicinal cocktail for the cure. When posed a question about what will be the cure of our affliction in these times, what is the cure? Sylvia Winter offers language, but Morrison tells us that language really cannot do it all. It just can't. And what is beyond it, or next to it, or behind it are other disciplines, she says. For me, performing beyond language is music. For our time, virtual performances, giving an account of what is at stake, pointing to what we need that allows us to persist in certain ways through the missing and the warnings not to take music making and gathering for granted, through the sorrow and the woefulness, Pan in Unity with its arrangement of Marley's One Love and Lennon's Imagine instructs in a viscerally performative way on how to get through it while evoking an aesthetic of world making, offering transformation and possibilities. Such virtual Pan performances in this time, within the pandemic, reaches for collectivity, and in doing so, moves to enact a transformation of the whole entire society, which Winter tells us is crucial. In a time when so much gathering, I'm just wrapping up. In a time when so much gathering was surveilled, Pan in Unity, its virtual Pan event offered us unsurveilled gathering, a possibility to gather otherwise, and a reimagining of what collectivity can be and how we might think and experience it even while in isolation individually. The virtual space makes for another imagining of relation. It tells us something about how we can and do and might live in a world differently. Thank you very much.